This strange tale is a deep dive into a possible future world where the line between humans and technology becomes so blurred it can truly enlighten us, but may also uncover darker undertones.
The heist that broke the universe. It was ElevenLabs that created the prototype that broke the universe. A team of thieves who had no idea what they were getting into set the event in motion. Axel was the leader of those thieves, a tall and beautiful Valkyrie with a strategic mind developed over 100 years in the field of corporate espionage. Gears and Wrench were the muscle, although Gears was also the group's expert locksmith with her adaptive hands and multiform digits. Socket was the smallest, but often the most important member. His cranial wetware and hacking modules got them access to any and every network, regardless of the level of cybersecurity in place. The final member of the five was a polymorph who went by the name of Crusher. They were an expert in adaptive disguise, often switching between male, female, and everything in between in order to complete a mission. For this particular job, they began the day as a man, and they had their arms wrapped around Axel, while they both floated in the slick fluids of a regional pod. A red light flashing and a high-pitched beeping sound woke Axel with a start. The regional pod was draining the last of its healing fluids, and it was open at the top where Crusher stood with a hand stretched out to help Axel to her feet.
We've got a top priority message through on the ether line. It's from Haskell,
Crusher said, as he guided Axel out of the pod and onto the warm metallic floor of their penthouse apartment.
Probably another tech hunt for one of the RimWorld craft. Haskell's been investing in the expansion for months now, and he always marks those requests as top priority,
Axel said, as she bathed in the warm air blowing up from the floor vents and drying her shimmering white skin.
No, nothing for the expansion.
Crusher looked at her with mild concern on his face.
This is something unique. Look.
He tapped on the side of his head twice, and a holographic display popped up between them. The hologram shimmered in waves of blue and silver as a helmet-like object rotated around, with the word classified rotating at its center. Axel's eyes shone like azure crystals as she studied the object.
What is it?
She asked. Crusher tapped the side of his head again, and several lines of text appeared as part of the hologram.
Haskell says it's a prototype, one of a kind. It's ElevenLabs research tech they originally developed for deep space mining crews. They've been trying to figure out a way to send messages faster than the speed of light.
Comms faster than the speed of light?
Axel asked, sounding surprised.
That even possible?
I don't know, but Haskell has info that this prototype doesn't even do that.
Crusher responded. Axel tossed her long blonde hair up and back over her shoulders.
So then what does it do?
Haskell doesn't know, but he knows it's valuable, and he's willing to fund the team for a whole 3 more rotations if we get it for him.
Crusher said, as he shrugged.
Well, I guess I'm in. What about you?
Axel paused for a moment, before asking the 2 most important questions for any job.
Where is it, and what's protecting it?
Crusher smiled, winked, and with one more tap of his finger, sent all the data for the mission directly to Axel's cybercortex. Two huge men adorned in dark metallic gorilla suits stood street-side, facing in opposite directions, as the day turned into late evening. They were mech guards for a black site building that ElevenLabs used for their most valuable tech. One had the red stripe of a commander on his right shoulder, and he was making small talk with his subordinate. He kept turning around at points where he was emphasizing some element in his conversation he felt was interesting or important. The other guard agreed a lot in response, and occasionally flexed his arms, which caused the servo joints of his robotic suit to whir and crackle. Their conversation died suddenly when they heard the distinct sound of high heels on concrete approach them from across the street. They both turned and their eye lamps became brighter as they began to identify the source of the sound. A tall and pale woman approached them carrying a large teddy bear with a yellow ribbon tied in a bow around its neck. She had long blonde hair fashioned into a tight ponytail, wore thick-rimmed round spectacles, and walked with confidence in her black suit jacket and pencil skirt. She was beautiful. The subordinate guard felt himself stammering a little as his cheeks flushed under his battlesuit headgear.
Who goes there?
He managed to splutter out.
Yeah, identify yourself, sweetheart.
The commander joined in, trying to sound both unfazed and authoritative.
Don't you recognize me?
Asked the woman.
I'm Dr. Bichel's daughter. It's his birthday tomorrow, and I wanted to put this present in his office as a surprise. It's a family tradition, you know.
She held up the bear to them, and its head lolled to one side. The subordinate wasn't really listening to her, and was transfixed by her long, beautiful legs.
My mother always got my daddy a bear for his birthday, God rest her soul. And I carry on the tradition in her memory, except she would always surprise him by leaving it somewhere he wouldn't expect.
The commander stood up taller with his fist pushing down on the sidewalk.
That's a swell thing to do, but this is a secure building, miss. Ain't no one allowed inside without company clearance, and that includes the director's own daughter.
Oh, of course I understand.
She responded, then held the bear directly towards him.
But maybe you could be a darling and put the bear in his office for me?
At first he frowned, but then took the bear.
Look, miss, I will have to run a security check and put in an official request to headquarters if...
The woman stopped the guard from continuing with a gentle hand she placed on the metallic forearm of his exosuit.
But you'll spoil the surprise,
She said with sad eyes.
How about you run your security checks and go ahead and place the gift for me yourself? Never mind no official request. Do whatever scans you need to. I have nothing to hide.
The commander thought for a moment, and then was nervously interrupted by his subordinate.
Step over here, miss. I'll need to do a full bio sweep and check with our records.
He blushed as he spoke. His cheeks were almost as red as his hair. The woman obliged and stood motionless as various beams of light scanned up and down her, as the guard read off the results. The commander scanned the bear at the same time. There was nothing but the faux fur skin material and fabricated nylon balls for the stuffing.
Bear's clear,
He reported.
Miss Bichel, you're clear too.
The other guard responded. She smiled pleasantly and winked at the subordinate, then turned and headed back across the street into the darkness.
Thank you, boys,
She said as she disappeared from their sight. The commander turned to face the other guard, still holding the stuffed animal.
Stay alert. I'll be back in 5.
He said as part of the building wall raised to reveal the disguised entrance. He had to duck slightly as he headed inside. His subordinate repositioned himself next to the entrance and tried in vain not to think about the director's stunningly beautiful daughter. Professor Ernest Stevenson tapped out the last of his equation adjustments, pushed his glasses up high on his nose, and sat back in his office chair. Newton, his code monkey, disentangled the data transfer tendrils from his tail and climbed over to sit on his master's shoulder. They both scanned the numbers coming up on the holo display. The professor took in an elongated breath, tutted, and began to pet Newton as he pondered his failed attempt at streamlining his algorithm.
It's all because of the subspace uncertainty field,
He said, while pointing at the holo display.
Too many quantum possibilities and no way of passing through them.
Newton looked at where his master was pointing, then looked directly at him and frowned. It was now late into the evening, and they had been running tests on the professor's theoretical algorithm adjustments all day. They had barely stopped to take bathroom breaks, let alone find time for a nutritional upload. He waved at his master to get his attention on him away from the holodisplay, and once he obliged, Newton pointed towards his mouth and made chewing motions.
Oh gosh, yes, how silly of me. These blasted equations would have me forget my own head if it wasn't screwed on. I'll get you a peanut butter slam. I know it's your favorite.
Ernest spun his head 180 degrees clockwise, folded back his third and fourth arms, opened the icebox that hung on the back of his office chair, and pulled out a frozen banana that was covered in peanut butter. He spun his head clockwise again until he was facing Newton, who was bobbing up and down in eager anticipation. Ernest gave him the frozen treat and was enjoying watching his lab partner devour the banana when the distinct clunking and clanking of a guard's servo suit went by his office. The noises stopped shortly after. There was the sound of a door opening, and then the same sounds arose, but heading in the opposite direction.
Curious,
Ernest thought, and after placing Newton on his desk, he rose up from his chair and went to investigate. There should be nobody else in the building this late. He pondered the reason why a gorilla-suited guard would be walking by the research offices at night. As a welcome break from his troubled algorithmic adjustments, he resolved to find out what was going on. Stepping into the hallway, there was no sign of the guard. But after looking around, he could see that the door to the director's office was slightly ajar. He walked towards it with both sets of his arms folded, and he increased the brightness in his optical receptors to get a better look. Once he arrived, he sheepishly pushed the door open and peered into the darkness. Axel was situated between two great hulking figures. She was drawing a three-dimensional map in the air and explaining the layout to her companions. The figure to her left was polishing her hands and fingers, and kept looking between the map, and then her hands again. The other figure stood holding a huge plasma ejection shotgun that had its barrel sawn off, so it looked wide and stumpy. It seemed it should be incredibly heavy and cumbersome, but the person wielding it did so with deft ease. He squinted at the map, and shaking his head said,
"Hey, Gears, you think you can fit down those corridors?"
Oh, fuck off, Wrench.
She snapped back.
You think your fat ass, hauling that ridiculous hardware, can even fit through the front door?
They both stopped for a second, looking at each other with deadpan expressions, before laughing uncontrollably.
Oh, my goodness, you two. I am trying to explain the routes here. Stop joking around.
Axel scolded them, refusing to join in with the pre-mission banter. Just then, the door to her penthouse apartment lifted open, and a beautiful, tall blonde woman walked in and removed the spectacles that she'd been wearing. As she walked towards the group, she kicked off her heels and shook out her long blonde hair from the ponytail she'd had it tied in. Axel looked at her and smiled.
You get socks situated?
She asked.
Like a scorpion on a frog, darling.
Crusher replied. Ernest Stevenson was not a man of courage. Technically, he was barely a man at all. Save for his brain, spine, and some of his nervous system, he was entirely a collection of successive ElevenLabs technical breakthroughs and accomplishments in biorobotics. His legs and both sets of his arms were servo limbs, similar to the tech in the Gorilla Guard suits, although not as robust or hardy. Multiple computers and data analysis networks filled his head and chest cavity, making him one of the most advanced researchers, not only at ElevenLabs, but also the entire local cluster. He was not built for combat. He was built for science. So braving the dark offices of his employer late at night was not something he expected to find himself doing. But here he was. He scanned the room for something anomalous. He'd been to the director's office on many occasions, so anything out of place would likely be obvious. Nothing was out of place. Or was it? He took a second look at the seat of the director's office chair, and then realized he was looking at two round plastic eyes, positioned at a slant. Below the eyes, he could make out a yellow bow and a round furry mass. Ernest was just beginning to piece together what he was seeing when the round furry mass began to move. He stepped forward into the office to get a clearer image as the furry mass was expanding and changing shape.
Is that a teddy bear?
He thought to himself when there was a loud pop, the sound of a zipper, and the furry mass became something flat on the floor. A dark figure rose up and out of it. 4 drones hovered high above the black site in silent mode. Each drone held one of the team members in a harness. This was often how missions for them started. Individual stealth drones had the speed and maneuverability to get operatives to a key location without detection. In this instance, Axel and Crusher could be delivered to the roof of the building, where there was an access panel leading to the building's security hub, while Gears and Wrench were being dropped to take out the guards at the front of the building. It was important to make a coordinated strike so that no alarm could be raised until after the mission was complete. All they needed was the signal from Socket that the communications network had been disabled. Axel tapped her wrist, and her holocom projected a small box with the words, "Stand by," blinking inside it.
Come on, Sock.
she thought.
You're a complication.
The small man said, while pointing a 9mm pistol at Ernest's head. With his free hand, he placed a small, round device on the director's desk and began a small series of taps on his left cheek. Multitudes of tendrils grew out of the device and permeated the desk. Its holoscreen turned on, with a series of lines of code, moving from top to bottom at a furious pace. Ernest shifted on his feet nervously.
Oh dear, I don't mean to be a complication.
Quiet.
The small figure commanded.
And quit moving around. I need to concentrate.
Several thoughts flashed through Ernest's mind. Some ideas, too, good and bad. Should he attempt to accost the small-framed criminal currently doing God knows what to the company's computer system? Probably not. Maybe if he proffered some assistance, gain some trust and speed the situation along. Once the criminal gets what he wants, surely then he would leave soon after and things could go back to normal. Not sure how he would explain his actions to his superiors. But in the immediate moment, the views of his bosses seemed much less important than getting out of this unscathed. Ernest decided to make his gambit.
Look, if you tell me what you need, perhaps I can help you.
He spoke softly, so as not to spook the person pointing a gun in his face. Out of the corner of his eye, he could see his code monkey, Newton, slowly climbing around the office wall close to the ceiling.
Why can't I access the security mainframe?
The figure asked, his voice tinged with annoyance.
So you don't know about the special layers of security for this building?
Ernest asked in response.
I did my homework. I know all the advanced systems used by ElevenLabs, but this is something unique. How do I access the security features?
He asked.
I could help you, but...
Ernest stopped speaking and stood frozen, as Newton suddenly lunged down upon the intruder, only to be thwarted by lightning-fast reflexes that left it dangling helplessly in the grip of the stranger.
Whoa, 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 what do we have here?
Ernest stepped forward, his hands raised as if to take hold of Newton.
Please don't hurt him,
he pleaded. The intruder looked at the monkey and then back at Ernest.
Oh, I won't hurt him, as long as you help me.
Crusher had grown impatient and was about to suggest aborting the whole mission when Axel's comm burst into life and the familiar sound of Socket's voice came through, telling them to access the security hub.
He did it.
Axel exclaimed. Holding her arm down to the roof access, she entered the sequence of numbers that she had learned from Socket, and several tendrils grew out of her forearm and penetrated the door panel below them. There was a loud click, and the panel shifted, then slowly peeled back, opening their way into the building. Crusher dropped down first and scanned the interior with his eye refractors, filling the area with a cyan glow. Axel landed next to him and looked around for the security server hub.
There,
she said, pointing to the far wall. They ran over to the tall block of blinking lights and water-cooling pipes that ran over the hub, and she let her arm tendrils do the rest. Outside, at the front of the building, two huge figures were sitting atop the metal heaps of the gorilla guards they had just stunned from above. The hidden entrance in the wall began to reveal itself as they got the word from Axel that they had secured the building.
All right, let's do this,
Gears said enthusiastically. Wrench grunted in agreement as he followed her in.